I sort of was not really that surprised to hear him say that, or I at least think it's consistent with his position, because the most recent stuff I'd heard from him was on this chat that he did with Lex Friedman, which I talked about on one of the previous podcast episodes. And he basically was talking about, okay, Bitcoin Cash had the right idea, but then they kind of got embroiled in the fork with Bitcoin SV and Craig Wright left. And then he sort of talked about, okay, and then later on they forked off from eCash. And whereas I sort of feel like there's a split after, like, not a split, but there's a line after that point, that the community at that point was finally on the same page after all the back and forth. But it sounds like either he doesn't agree with that, or he maybe hasn't been paying as close attention. So in his mind, it's probably just, trailing off over the next few years in more splits and more kind of, chaos, right? It is logical that initially the Bitcoin Cash side was defined as the not Bitcoin Core side, rather than, it sort of devolved into, well, what are we going to do instead? And hence there's been kind of multiple forks. But I feel like now the Bitcoin Cash community is on the same page, and it does have the white paper is essentially still the roadmap of, this is what we're trying to do, and we're trying to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash, usable currency, right? So even though Vitalik was kind of talking about, okay, it's all over, and I think these guys are just pretty much done, I think he might be surprised if Bitcoin Cash is finally on the same page and starts to roar back. It's kind of pretty harsh for him to say it's a failure, given that the fees are still low, it's still completely usable, still has a strong community, it has smart BCHs come out, the kind of governance process and all that, there's been wrangling about that, but it's mostly been, sorted out. So I guess Vitalik copped some flack from the BCH community, kind of being like, well, our network's actually perfectly fine, and it's a bit rich to be, criticizing it as a failure when it still does exactly what it says. Meanwhile, Ethereum, is besieged with competitors because of its own high fees.